You know they were wrong for you. Your friends saw it. You see it now. And yet, 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, you're still thinking about them. Not occasionally, constantly. You wake up and they're the first thing in your mind. You go to sleep replaying conversations that never led anywhere. You see something that reminds you of them, and your entire nervous system lights up like you've been electrocuted. Here's what no one tells you. This isn't weakness. This isn't you being dramatic or pathetic or unable to move on. This is your brain operating exactly as it was designed to, just in a way that's keeping you trapped. Tonight, I'm going to show you why you can't stop thinking about someone who was bad for you, and more importantly, what you can do about it before you go to sleep. Let's start with what's actually happening. When you can't stop thinking about someone, your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing what it evolved to do when it encounters an unsolved problem. The issue is that the problem, why didn't this person love me the way I needed, has no clean answer. So your mind keeps running simulations. It replays the last conversation. It imagines what you should have said. It constructs alternate timelines where things worked out differently. Psychologists call this rumination. But that word makes it sound passive, like background noise. It's not. Rumination is your brain's attempt to gain control over something that already happened. It's trying to solve an equation that has no solution. Here's the strange part. The worse the relationship was, the stronger the obsession tends to be. If someone treated you well and it ended amicably, you might feel sad, but you don't spiral into months of obsessive thinking. But if the relationship was inconsistent, hot and cold, emotionally volatile, if they hurt you, you can't let it go. Think of it like this. Imagine you're playing a game where sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but you can't figure out the pattern. You'd keep playing, wouldn't you? You'd keep trying to crack the code. That's what your brain is doing with this person. It's not reminiscing. It's trying to win a game that's already over. And the cruelest part? The person you can't stop thinking about probably isn't thinking about you at all. Carl Jung understood this nearly a century before neuroscience could prove it. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the Anima and the Animus, the unconscious feminine aspect in men and the unconscious masculine aspect in women. These are not literal people. They're psychological archetypes, images of the idealized other that live inside you. When you meet someone in the real world who seems to match that internal image, something extraordinary and dangerous happens. You stop seeing the person. You start seeing your projection. In his 1928 work, The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, Jung wrote, "The anima is a personification of all feminine psychological tendencies in a man's psyche. She is the chaos, the black, bottomless night. She is the dark cave, the abyss of the unknown." What Jung is describing here is not romantic love, it's possession. When you project your anima or animus onto someone who is unstable, emotionally unavailable, or outright harmful, you're not falling in love with them. You're falling into your own unconscious. And because they're a projection, a screen onto which you cast your inner world, they become infinitely fascinating. You can't stop thinking about them because you're actually obsessing over a part of yourself that you haven't integrated. This is why the wrong people feel so right. They activate something ancient in you, something unresolved. Jung believed that until you withdraw these projections, until you see the person as they actually are, not as the embodiment of your unconscious needs, you'll remain hooked. You'll keep replaying the relationship because you're not really replaying them. You're circling around something inside yourself that you don't yet understand. Now let's bring in the Stoics because they had their own version of this insight. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, spent much of his life thinking about the power of mental impressions. In Book 8 of Meditations, he writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Aurelius understood that the problem isn't the person you're thinking about. The problem is that you've given that mental image of them authority over your inner life. Every time you replay a conversation, every time you imagine what they're doing now, you're reinforcing a neural pathway. You're teaching your brain that this person is still important, still central, still worthy of your attention. The Stoics called this ascent. You have a thought, an impression, and you either give it power or you don't. The thought, "I miss them," is just a thought. It only becomes suffering when you say, "Yes, this thought is true, and I will follow it down the spiral." Aurelius would tell you, the person is gone, but the image of them remains because you keep feeding it. Now here's where it gets interesting, because there's a third voice we need to hear, and it's Erich Fromm. Fromm was a psychoanalyst and social philosopher who wrote The Art of Loving in 1956, and in it, he makes a devastating distinction between mature love and what he calls symbiotic attachment. Mature love, Fromm argues, is based on two whole people choosing each other. Symbiotic attachment is based on having, on dependency, possession, and need. Fromm writes, immature love says, "I love you because I need you." Mature love says, "I need you because I love you." If you can't stop thinking about someone who was bad for you, it's because the relationship wasn't about love. It was about need. You became dependent on them for something you should have been giving yourself. Validation, security, a sense of being chosen. And when they were inconsistent, when they withheld what you needed, your brain didn't interpret that as, "This person isn't good for me." It interpreted it as, "I need to try harder." Fromm would say, you're not obsessed with them. You're obsessed with the idea that if you could just figure out what went wrong, you could finally feel whole. Now let's see what happens when you put someone in an fMRI machine and show them a picture of the person who rejected them. In 2010, Helen Fisher and her team at Rutgers University did exactly that. They recruited people who had recently been dumped, people still in the acute pain of rejection, and scanned their brains while they looked at photos of their ex-partners. What they found was remarkable. 3 regions of the brain lit up intensely. The first was the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, the part of your brain responsible for motivation, focus, and the release of dopamine. The second was the nucleus accumbens, which is central to reward processing and craving. The third was the orbitofrontal cortex, which is associated with obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior. Here's what that means in plain language. When you look at a picture of someone who rejected you, your brain responds the same way it would to cocaine. Not metaphorically, literally. The neural signature of romantic rejection is almost identical to the neural signature of drug withdrawal. Fisher's study proved what Jung intuited and what the Stoics warned against. The person you can't stop thinking about has hijacked your brain's reward system. You're not being sentimental. You're experiencing a neurochemical addiction. But here's where it gets darker. If the relationship was healthy and it ended, your brain eventually adjusts. The dopamine system recalibrates. You move on. But if the relationship was toxic, if it involved intermittent reinforcement, emotional volatility, unpredictability, your brain doesn't recalibrate. It gets stuck. In 1981, psychologists Donald Dutton and Susan Painter published groundbreaking research on what they called traumatic bonding. They studied women in abusive relationships and discovered something counterintuitive. The more inconsistent and harmful the relationship, the stronger the attachment became. They updated this work in 1993, and their findings were clear. When a relationship alternates between moments of intensity, affection, or validation, and moments of coldness, cruelty, or withdrawal, the brain interprets this as a variable reward schedule. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. You don't know when the next reward is coming, so you keep playing. Dutton and Painter's work explains why you can't stop thinking about someone who was bad for you. Your brain learned that this person is unpredictable, and unpredictability is more addictive than consistency. If they had been awful all the time, you would have left. If they had been wonderful all the time, you'd have a clear memory and no obsession. But because they were both, your brain is still trying to figure out the pattern. It's still hoping for the next hit. Now let's add the final piece, rumination. In 2011, researchers at MIT and Harvard, led by Susan Whitfield Gabrielli, studied what's called the default mode network, or DMN. The DMN is a network of brain regions that becomes active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, or lost in thought. Normally, the DMN is healthy. It's how you process experiences and integrate memories. But after a breakup, especially a painful one, the DMN goes into overdrive. it becomes hyperactive, and instead of integrating the experience and moving on, it traps you in rumination loops. The same thoughts, the same questions, the same scenarios played over and over. Whitfield Gabrielli's study found that people prone to depression and anxiety have an overactive DMN. But here's the insight. Everyone's DMN becomes overactive after romantic rejection. Your brain is literally forcing you to think about this person, even when you consciously want to stop. So let's connect the threads. Helen Fisher showed that rejection activates addiction pathways. Dutton Painter showed that toxic relationships create trauma bonds through intermittent reinforcement. Whitfield Gabrielli showed that your brain's resting state becomes a rumination trap. What Jung called the Anima projection. What Marcus Aurelius called giving assent to false impressions. What Erich Fromm called symbiotic attachment. Modern neuroscience has confirmed all of it. You can't stop thinking about someone who was bad for you because your brain is wired to seek resolution. Your dopamine system is in withdrawal, and your default mode network is stuck replaying an unsolvable problem. This isn't a character flaw. This is your nervous system doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, just in a context it was never meant to handle. So what do? You can't outthink this. You can't logic your way out of an addiction. But you can rewire the neural pathways that keep you trapped. And the way you do that is through a practice the Stoics would have recognized immediately: deliberate cognitive detachment. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to try something. I call it the Stoic Projection Journal, and it's designed to do 3 things: disrupt rumination, withdraw the projection, and reteach your brain that this person is no longer central to your life. Here's how it works. Step 1. Write down the obsessive thought exactly as it appears. Don't edit it. Don't soften it. If the thought is, I miss them, write that. If it's, why didn't they love me? Write that. If it's, maybe if I had said this differently, they'd still be here. Write that. The goal here is externalization. As long as the thought stays in your head, it feels like truth. Once it's on paper, it's just a sentence. Step 2. Ask yourself, am I thinking about the person or the projection? This is the Jung move. Look at what you wrote and ask, is this about who they actually were, or is this about who I needed them to be? If you find yourself thinking, they were so perfect for me, stop. Were they? Or did they just activate a fantasy of being chosen, being special, being saved from yourself? Write down one specific behavior they exhibited that hurt you. Just one. Something concrete. They ignored my texts for days. They criticized me in front of others. They said they loved me and then disappeared. Now read what you wrote. That's the person, not the projection. The projection is fascinating. The person is just someone who hurt you. Step 3. Reframe the memory as a lesson, not a loss. This is the Marcus Aurelius move. The Stoics believed that everything that happens to you is raw material for your character. The question isn't, why did this happen? The question is, what does this teach me about what I will and will not accept? Write this sentence. This person taught me that I am willing to tolerate X, fill in the blank. Inconsistency, emotional cruelty, being an option instead of a priority. Now write the second sentence. I will not tolerate this again. You're not journaling to feel better. You're journaling to train your brain to see this experience as complete, as information, not identity. Step 4. Close the loop before sleep. Your default mode network is most active right before you fall asleep. If you go to bed ruminating, you'll dream about them. You'll wake up thinking about them. The loop continues. So before you close your eyes, say this out loud. I release the image I created. I see the person as they were. This story is over. You don't have to believe it yet. Just say it. You're planting a seed in your subconscious. Over time, with repetition, the neural pathway weakens. The obsession loses its grip. Do this every night for 2 weeks. Some nights it will feel pointless. Some nights you'll cry while you write. That's fine. You're not trying to stop feeling. You're trying to stop feeding the pattern. And here's what will happen. One night, You'll realize you didn't think about them all day. Then it'll be 2 days, then a week. The thought will still come, but it won't have the same power. It'll be like seeing an old photograph of someone you used to know. Interesting, but no longer central. That's when you'll know you've won. So here's the core insight. You can't stop thinking about someone who was bad for you, because they were never just a person. They were a projection, a variable reward, an unsolved problem your brain couldn't let go of. But now you know what's happening. You know it's not about them. It's about the wiring. And wiring can be changed. Next week, I'll be talking about something related, the concept of limerence, and why some people become addicted not to a relationship, but to the state of longing itself. If tonight's video resonated, that one will cut even deeper. If you found this useful, let it sit with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And try the journaling practice tonight. Don't wait. The longer you feed the loop, the stronger it gets. I'll see you in the dark.